On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we welcome former college basketball player, real estate entrepreneur, and a man who loves to be involved in his community, Mr. Charlie Wills, to talk about his life experiences as an elite college basketball player, a son, and now a proud father. Here we go.
Good morning. What is up? Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the west side of our great capital city, Madison, Wisconsin. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, the big X, at tdecora8791, as well as hitting me up on Facebook at yours truly, Tim Decora. Glad you could join us today wherever you happen to be. If it's morning rush hour, your lunch hour, getting your workout, or, maybe you're driving to the third shift, wherever you happen to be, you're joining us. Today, we welcome a good friend of mine, former men's basketball player, Charlie Wills. Charlie Wills, I'm going to quickly go in and then we're going to share a little banter back and forth. Charlie was a member of the 2000 men's Final Four team, University of Wisconsin Badgers. He played in 129 games over his 4-year career, making 61 starts over that time, which included his 32 games of his senior year. What a magical year, and we'll touch on that. He was on Coach Bo Ryan's, and that would be Hall of Fame head basketball coach, Bo Ryan's first team in 2002, when the Badgers then captured the Big Ten regular season title. Its first since many, many decades, 1947. Since then, he's remained in the Madison area as the owner of the Charlie Wills Real Estate Partners team. He also serves as part-time basketball analyst for the Badger Radio Network, which covers UW men's basketball. And finally, he gives back. He has been instrumental in the 100 Men of Dane County and most recently, Cure Local. We're going to welcome to the show, Charlie. What is up?
Thanks, Tim. How are you, man? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. I'm glad you could join us. I'm paying you back, kind of. I appeared on your podcast a little bit ago, and I'm paying the returning favor.
So. Glad to be here, man. This is a great idea. I think the more that these conversations are had, I think people start to normalize them, right, and stop making them such a negative or weird or too big of a problem to cover or talk about.
Yeah, I mean the depth and the layers. I would consider you like the movie Shrek. You have a lot of layers that you got going on, from former athlete to business entrepreneur to giving back to people in your community, and you've been able to do that. And now you're also the proud father of 2 kids and navigating parenthood with along with all those things. Right? What have you found most challenging? Anything?
Well, children are beautiful tellers of the truth, which sometimes really stings. But what I've noticed and what so far, right, they're 9 and 6, so we've got a lot of life, my wife and I, Crystal, to explore together. But what I've learned early is that it's not you versus them. It's if you, I must screw up this theological view of it, but my best interpretation is that God is our Father, and he gives us these things to be a part of, and they're hard and difficult to do and be consistent because we're human and we're sinners. That's just that's the world we're born into. Mm-hmm. But then now you look at your child, it's the same thing. They have a hard time to follow and believe in this vision that you're building them to be their greatest version of themselves, and they don't quite believe it. And they're not quite sure they want to follow it because they know better, which is pride. So we're born with that innately in our bodies. And I think that's the hardest part as a parent that I find is this right? And all you have to do is trust that this is what God did for us, and he already created a playbook. So just follow the playbook. It's going to work out, even as scary as it may feel or seem, or I'm not sure I did that right or wrong or what. You're supposed to second guess yourself because you're not God. You're not perfect. But but he made a playbook for us. And I'd say that's probably the hardest part as a parent is stay to your vision, stay where you are, stay what you're trying to do, make sure you repeat it constantly. It's kind of like the rhythms of a basketball team. The coach comes in and says, here's who we are. Here's the vision and the goals that we're going to, try to focus on for this year. Right, guys? Right. And then what do? They repeat it every single day. Every single day and every single thing that you do, they are repeating that in your face. And sometimes you're like, ugh, quit talking to me about that. But what do you get after that? You're like, they did something unbelievable for us. They were so strong in their foundation of who they were and the vision for us that they were able to take a bunch of 18-year-old knuckleheads and put us in a place to be successful, not only as sports athletes, but as young men. So I lean on that experience to know that it's true. It will happen, but it still doesn't mean that it's not terrifying.
Man, that's good. That's good. A lot of good points. So basketball player, business entrepreneur, giving back to the community. And now I'm ahead and theologian.
Yeah, right.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good stuff.
It's a journey, as you know, right? We're apprentices forever. We're never going to get to a level where we could be anything close to God. So what it is it's a daily journey, and it's constantly learning. Every time I read something in Scripture, I'm like, gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And just try to reapply it to your life. I've probably read that Scripture probably a dozen times, but like, how do you not remember? It's because we're human, right? We're not using those in our daily practice. So you talk about all these things. They're amazing. I mean, when you look back at what's there, what did I do? Who was I previous to today, right? Amazing accomplishments. I mean, you look back from the moment I started to love basketball, which was probably like 6 or 7 years old, to the moment now that I'm 46. So 40 years later, still means a whole lot to me. I love the game still. But that drive, that internal peace, I think was something that you want to talk about. I think some kids just have it, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think it depends on the environment. And we've talked about off the podcast about what did that look like as our adults that were in our life, our parents, right? Like for my dad, he was probably the most instrumental. There were other men and women in my life that were teachers in other places that I gained things from. But when you hear the story, and I've told this story a bunch, and I'm going to write a book about it because it needs to be said, it's not in a way to punish my dad. It's to actually honor that past journey and share the story so people can hear it and know that it's difficult and somebody else probably has dealt with it, or if not worse. And I've said this many times, and I get emotional when I say it, it's a blessing. Didn't feel like it at the time because my dad was very physical. Sometimes he would talk down to you, sometimes he would hit us, and not in a way that like he was like a quick swift, he was in control. It was pure rage, and it was out of control. And it did a lot of damage. Internally, externally, it did a lot of damage to who I was and my image of myself. And so I dove into sport, something I knew really well. I was very gifted physically, but I also cared a lot about it. And so I wanted to do the best in everything. So school, art, basketball. I mean, you name it. I always wanted to. Yeah, cross country. When he gave me a chore, I was going to do it the best way because I knew if I didn't do my absolute best and show up that way, my dad was going to make me do it over. And there was no exceptions. There wasn't like, well, you look tired today, son. Why don't you take a day off? I don't care how you feel. Get it done, was his always comment. So I think a lot of those like internal things drove me inside, and I didn't know how to express them or where to go with them. So I put them into things. I put them into doing, right? Yeah. And a lot of that, I think today still sits with me, and I take that as a benefit. Some people will be like, oh man, you gotta get rid of that. No. It's a superpower. I have a power that's inside of me that if I let go too far, it's dark, it's prideful, it's all the things I'm not supposed to be. But if I use the majority of it, which is like 85, 90% of it, it's really good. It lets me do the things I'm meant to be. And a lot of the things that you went over, I mean, that's a huge list, but like, I think about my purpose. My purpose is creating significance and impact in others. That is my purpose. So whatever I do, I think about how does this meet that criteria? And if it doesn't meet that criteria, or that person doesn't meet that criteria, I cannot spend time or energy on that criteria or on that thing. because it's not true to my purpose. I'm wasting time and energy. So even though it sounds like a lot of things that we're currently doing, right? We've got a great real estate practice that's gone into investments, that's gone into property management, right? It's all these things that we get to do in work because we love to serve who we're serving. You relate that also at home. If I'm not doing my best to create significance and impact in my family, in our charity with all the guys that I got to help create that organization, right? It started with a men's group. Now it's the women's collective on top of it. You mentioned it. We're moving into using multiple lanes to impact our community. So like all of these are significant creation in changes that, I don't know, just something that drives me. It doesn't cost me more energy because it's on purpose, right? So yes, it sounds like a big list, but it's driven from a place of deep sadness that got turned into, I'm super, super grateful.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of you set us up there for the second segment. I appreciate that because that's going to give hopefully the listeners out there an opportunity to stick around for our second episode when we talk about being that elite athlete and then having somebody behind the scenes pushing you and getting the most out of you, and then you're gonna touch on a lot of that stuff. So yeah, we talked about the basketball season. It is approaching. It's got to get your blood flowing, especially with the new team and the new people on that team, and you get to plug in. Do you know how many games you've been assigned
Not
to yet?
Contracts went out a month ago. Those are signed. Saw the schedule come out a couple weeks ago. We're just waiting for TV. So my role is to fill in when Brian cannot be there. He's the main color analyst with Matt LePay as the play-by-play.
The polar bear for those.
The polar bear.
Ryan Butch.
Nina, Wisconsin. So anyways, so he's the head color analyst. I fill in when he has got obligations because he's also doing, I think, Fox and Big Ten on the TV.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. He's really expanded his.
Picked up some new gigs.
Yeah, I'm super pumped for him. That's what's available to him, and so I'm filling in when he's at those obligations. So I love basketball. It's got me re-engaged. What I noticed last year is that it got me really, really excited about college athletics again. Just being that close, like having to analyze game film, being prepared for the game to talk intelligently and being ready because Matt's at a whole nother level. So you cannot show up to that. It's like going to play, pig with Michael Jordan. You didn't stretch. If you didn't stretch and get good sleep the night before, you're toast.
You got to have a little game. So if you're listening, Brian Butch, I would recommend taking as many gigs at Fox and the Big Ten Network so my man Charlie Wills can come out of the bullpen and fill in. I know you're going to be doing great. We're going to get kind of roll into segment number one. And I would just happen to be checking out your website, Charlie. That's www.charliewills.team. And your core values, I looked at those: great attitude, grateful hearts, extreme leadership, be fearless, loyal, competitive nature, high character. And those sound very similar to what the people who dine at Buck and Honey's for restaurants get, in addition to great customer service, prices that cover all budgets and appetites, great food, 5-star customer service is really what people bring people back, with locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Wanakee, Mount Horeb. There's always one close by. And I would also add to your core values of great customer service, and that you certainly aren't giving out food and fitting prices and budgets, but you're giving people houses. You're putting people in places that they can afford.
Yeah, everybody's got a unique situation, right? Whether it's coming from budget, location, family needs, maybe it's a life change, maybe it's a transfer across the country. We want to know what each one of those individual pieces are and how do we serve you in the best way. And our measuring stick are those 7 core values. Mm-hmm. So if something breaks down, everything breaks down, stuff happens, right? Failure is probably the most underutilized word. It's used as a negative, but we fail probably more times in a day than we have successes. But we should see that as then use your measuring stick. So each of us should have 5 to 7 core values. And that should be our measuring stick on everything. Did I have a great attitude? Check. Yep. Did I have a grateful heart? Not as much as I should. Okay, something to focus on. Did I lead? Was I fearless? Was I loyal? Was I competitive? And the reason it's the last one, high character, how you do anything is how you do everything. So being impeccable with your word, with your attitude, everything. So like when we have issues on our team, all I go back to is I don't worry about the thing that happened. I say, how did we misstep in our core values? Because that is where something happened. It isn't the thing that happened. The thing is the result. It came from a lack of focusing on one or more of the core values. So I love that you led with that and what Buck and Honeys do, because they do have those things. They are exceptional at service, and I think that's why they thrive so well in our area, is because they're family focused and they have great service.
All right, so we got about, we'll go with about 7 or 8 minutes on this segment. If we go a little longer, we might have to snip that other end, but I think you can probably button that up pretty tight. So there's some notes. So we're going to go pre-Wisconsin Badger Charlie Wills. I know we talked about this several times, and then most recently, I think it was a couple of days ago, and I'm going to go through some of those. So before coming to Madison, you grew up and attended Angola High School in Angola, Indiana. At the time you graduated, you were the all-time leading scorer. You earned first-team All-State honors, lettered all 4 years, and was a team captain your junior and senior year. That's pretty impressive. There's some things that I would love to have you touch on that I find amazing. I thought Scottie Pippen, the former Bulls forward, they said he grew like 8 inches in a summer. He went, he was 6 foot, and then at the end of summer he was 6'8". I was blown away by that. But then Charlie is telling me in a conversation that as a 12-year-old, and I find this hard to believe because I've known you as just a tall guy, you were 5'5". You were a little guy. And then over the summer, you grew to 6'8" as a 13-year-old. That's crazy. I mean, were you in the ice bath? Well, ice baths weren't around then, but were you in the? You would have probably been in the ice baths. You would have been trying to soothe the bones grow faster than muscle. So
they do, but I was active, so like I didn't really notice it. The only moments I still remember it being a thing, my back would spasm like crazy. Like my muscles would just be like, "What is happening?" Right? Because I'm growing, and so I'd have these like complete reactions I couldn't control. It would literally suck the air out of my lungs. Because like imagine on the backside of your back where those muscles are, all of that was like tensing and freezing. And like imagine when you get a Charlie horse, but it's your entire back.
Pardon the pun. Charlie.
Yeah, right. I didn't even intend that, by the way. So massive growth, but I was playing basketball and I was playing baseball. So I was really, really active. I think my bones and all of that, my muscle structure was able to keep up and grow and not have any issues. Like I never had knee issues, never had back issues, never had any spinal issues because I think I was active during that entire time.
I think there had to be that war waging between muscles not wanting to stretch, bones wanting to grow, and that's probably where you had some of those pains and spasms. Holy smokes!
Yeah, well, and also then you think of the genetics. Like my dad was 6'6", 300 pounds, Polish, huge man. My mom, her lineage, my biologic mother, her whole lineage is Ukrainian, French, and English. So like Ukrainians, big, tall, strong, French, tall, English, usually stocky, big, right? Like, so you mix that with Polish, and here's Charlie, right? And so I think I have these genetics that are there because at an early age, I had my dad's strength. And we found out much later that in all of that growth and everything that was happening, I actually had I think I've told you these accidents that like I didn't remember until I had a surgery when I was 23 to fix my bite on my face. Surgeon later's like, "Hey, you ever broken a bone?" And I was like,
I've heard those stories.
And I'm like, I'll tell you just one real quick is that we're riding our bikes down this hill by our house, and we would always blow through the stop sign because nobody drove on that road. So we were always just like not even really paying attention. It was not an excuse not to look at stop signs. By the way,
you weren't sharing the road like bicyclers want people to share the road.
It was the 80s, Tim. We didn't talk about sharing the road. No, it really wasn't. It just wasn't paying attention. Right? Stupid. Don't go through stop signs. Don't listen to me about that advice. A car was coming, and as I was the one, everybody went through successful. I was coming. I was last in line. I saw the car. I jumped. I hit the windshield right on like my butt and my back hit the windshield, and it throws me into the grass median. And I just remember laying there. I don't remember how I got there. I just remember like feeling my body being like, my toes are moving. My fingers are moving.
It's a good sign.
That's a really good sign. But then I was like, oh my God, my entire body. Like it just hurt, but I could feel everything. So I'm like, okay, nothing's broken then. If there's no pain other than feels like I just got hit with a massive baseball bat, right in the back. So
And how old were you?
12, right during all this.
I can imagine your buddies were going like, dude, that was cool.
Oh, they thought like, they thought I was dead because I was laying there. I wasn't moving. My eyes were closed. Anyways, where I'm getting with the story was this guy's like, look, your bone density is 2.5 times. So at 23, he's telling me this. And at 12, now I'm flashing back to all these stupid things I did. And I should have broken bones or died or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I not only have a super big, strong frame, bone density, my muscles have to keep up with that density, that heaviness. So then they're getting stronger just naturally because they have to, right?
Yep.
All my ligaments, everything. So now when I'm as a 13-year-old boy at 6'7", 6'8", with this big physical body that I don't know I have, I'm acting like a 13-year-old because I still think I'm a kid, and I pushed a kid, and it looked like I threw him because I wasn't ready for my physicality. I got in a lot of trouble. I was cleaning toilets for a month at the school, and I didn't mean to push him like that. I meant it like joking, like a shove, a quick little nudge. It looked like I picked him up and I threw him. And when I hit him like that, it was like that, like slow motion. No, like
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, I literally went over to him after it happened. And I was grabbing him. I was trying to hug him, and he was trying to, of course, push me away. And I was like, I didn't know. And everybody looked at me like, holy crap, freak! You just threw that kid. And that's when I realized that my body was physically in a place that it was. So, like we talk about Angola 12 growing. I was playing at 12 and 13 with think of MATC.
Yep.
Men at college, and at 12 and 13, I was destroying them, right? Physically, from a game and skills perspective, I was just, and the college coach was like, who are you? Where are you from? Like, I was like, I live right across the street. He's
and, are you a junior or senior?
Yeah, right. He asked me if I was a senior, and I was like, no, I'm 13, right?
I'm a seventh grader.
And he was like, oh, my Lord. So then I got on AAU circuit with Tiffany's.
Okay.
Still one of the best programs in Indiana for AAU.
Tiffany's, okay.
Yeah, really great program at North Central Indiana. Got with them at 13. I was playing with 16. At 15, when I started 14, 15 in high school, I was in with 18-year-olds, right? So I was able to play up. I got a lot of experience quickly, and my passion and veracity for knowing and being my best self just kept growing, right? Like I was obsessed. I was playing after school, before school. I was at school, sometimes playing or dribbling. I remember teachers and everybody coming to me after my graduation and being like, you dribbled everywhere. Like everywhere. You were walking to school, dribbling. You were there, dribbling. We had to take your ball away during the day so you didn't dribble in the hallways. But we didn't want to because we knew what you were doing. So it was like all of that started coming, and then it was just like this massive, it felt like a flood, honestly. Like high school, in the blink of an eye, was gone. Leading score still. I still can't believe 25, what is it? Yeah, 27 years later, it still holds, right? I'm surprised somebody hasn't smashed that record. So just had all these great things come together. Became an Indiana All-Star. That was announced at the end of my junior year. For my senior year, prestigious thing, the Indiana Kentucky All-Star Game, which is a big deal.
It is.
Wendy's All-American, all these things, right? At 14, though, when I was a freshman, when I got done with that freshman year is when I actually verbally committed, because you can't sign to your junior year, but I verbally committed to Wisconsin. So, go from 12, I was 5'5", to 2.5 years later, I'm committing to the University of Wisconsin. Think of that.
That's mind-blowing. From the 13, not 8 or 9 inches like Scottie Pippen, but 13 inches growing in that short amount of time. And then, you were solid as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. You went over 1,000 points your junior year, and you had a full year left to play.
Yeah.
And then me being from Wisconsin and being a junkie and a hoop head, I know all about that Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game. And I think back in the day, and I don't know if this held true when you were there, but I think both teams would rather go outside and fight it out and then maybe play basketball as a secondary thing.
Oh, yeah, there was hatred, straight hatred. And we didn't know why, but we just hated them just because, right? And then when you played with them, you were like, oh, these dudes are just like us.
Yeah.
So in the game, then you couldn't back down because you didn't want to show weakness. But after the game, you're like, hey, man, can we hang out a little bit? You guys are pretty cool. So then you didn't really know, but it was just this rivalry that you didn't understand. And it still goes on today because it just is, right? It's a border war. Kind of like Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Wisconsin, Iowa, or any of those, right? Like there's just these border wars that you don't understand, but they just exist. Right?
The Hatfields and McCoys. So we're actually going to move to the second segment here in a little bit, but I just want to touch on a couple things. You were just so you weren't just, for those of you that are listening out there, either as a parent or a current high school player, and you want to throw all of your money and all of your time into one sport and get that college scholarship. I'm telling you right now, Charlie, cross-country runner, you led her for 4 years and was a 3-time first-team all-conference selection in cross-country. You talked about playing baseball. You earned 2 letters in track and one in baseball. And you found time to do all of these other things. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about, you had to have that intensity and that work hard and that drive, and you had to dissipate some of that feistiness, intensity, and it looks like you chose the vehicle for sports to do that.
Yeah.
You were born. Parents were Laura and the late Bill Wills.
Yeah, he passed away 2 years ago.
Yep, I remember that, Charlie. So we're going to talk about in that second segment, but again, Buck and Honeys is one of our sponsors for today's episode. They sponsor our remote studios and facilitate the fun to ensure each guest has a memorable experience at a great value. Sounds like the great experience about what you just got done sharing, and then about what you're going to share with us here in a little bit in segment 2. So we will be back shortly with our guest, Charlie Wills. Welcome back. Segment 2 with my man, Charlie Wills, former basketball player with the University of Wisconsin Badgers and current entrepreneur in the real estate world. We're going to talk about the driving force behind your basketball career, because if there's not that driving force behind your basketball career, you and I aren't sitting here right now. You and I aren't friends and have a common bond, and that's not there. And I'm glad there was somebody and there was a driving force, because I've really appreciated your friendship over the years, and even though I've got a few years on you, I still look to you as almost as an advisor, and you can kind of fill that role for me. And so Charlie's going to talk about his dad. So when you were younger, you mentioned that your dad was very hard on you growing up. You also talked about a breaking point when your dad kind of pushed you, and it was more of not a physical but a verbal push, and you're going to touch on that at the very end of this segment, where you got to that breaking point. You're going to explain a little bit in detail. So, as a parent, then you're also going to touch on that as how are you going to approach your kids, and are you going to raise them similarly, differently, or take pieces from that? But let's kind of go back to when you first you talked about being first of all, Indiana basketball, kind of like Minnesota hockey. Minnesota hockey kids, they learn to skate before they walk.
Yeah.
You guys down in Indiana built a little differently mentally. You pick up a basketball before you do a lot of things down there. It's a religion. So I'm going to shut my trap here and let you talk a little bit about your dad and whatnot.
Yeah, well, he did drive me to do a lot of things, and as I grew up, I realized there were things that, good and bad, were in there, right? They were part of the mixture. The snapping point it was sometime, I'm going to say 2021, somewhere, I think it was 20, I don't know, somewhere in there. It's a long time ago. Somewhere right in there, just got done with the game.
While you're playing
during season. Yep, just got done with a game. We would always do like we had our team breakdowns, and you would do physical therapy, take a shower, get dressed, sometimes do media. I mean, it was a good hour and a half, always before whoever was waiting for us, we would see them. So they would have to, I would always tell my parents, like, you can leave and then come back, or everybody was like, no, just wait. Like, it's an hour and a half minimum. So that rhythm was there. I didn't have the best game, and my philosophy is even if I wasn't playing the best, I was going to find a way to compete and do something my team needed me to do, even if it wasn't towards my benefit, because I wanted us to win. And so that was my mentality. And that wasn't always everybody's mentality. I don't care. It was my mentality, and that's the way I wanted to handle it. So that game, shooting poor, I couldn't. It's like I had two left hands. It's just one of those games that you're just screwing up everywhere. One thing I could do, I could stop people and I could rebound. So I just said, I'm done shooting today. It's not happening. It's not going well, and I'm actually hurting my team by being that guy. So I am going to just be ferocious on defense and rebounding and anything else that I could get, just working hard, right?
Yep.
So in my mind, successful game. We won. I didn't play great, but we won, and I competed in other ways. I supported my team, did the things I thought needed to happen. I get up after an hour and a half, having to sit with all the things I did wrong. And at 20 years old, you know what you did wrong, especially a high-level athlete, and you know what you need to do next time, and you don't need someone chirping at you, especially your parents, right? Your dad, your mom, they love you, but shut your mouth. You don't need to be speaking right now because I'm already going to be the hardest critic on myself, right? You're only going to amplify inside what I already feel about myself, right? So I'm already feeling pretty low, and I get outside, and my dad starts right in. Everything he noticed that I didn't do, and why am I a screw up, and why didn't I do it this way, and all of a sudden it was like an episode in a movie where you just fade out, and you don't really hear anything else because now the rage is building so much in my body. But I'm terrified of my father still, right? I'm still that 8-year-old boy inside. It was time for me to stand up. And so I didn't want to do what he did. I didn't want to physically do anything. I didn't want to say anything I'd regret. I took my protein shake, and he was standing next. I can still remember, right outside the Kohl Center, there's a wall right outside of Gate A, just past the Bucky Badger shop. It's a cement wall. I smash my entire glass right by his face. And I said, enough. I walked away. I didn't talk to him 2 years, at least. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't need his advice. I didn't want his advice. He wasn't there for advice. He was there to tear me down. And that's what he needed. It was like a drug to him. He needed that ability to give that in what he said. Oh, I'm just giving you advice. I'm trying to make you your best self. No, you're not. No, you're not. You tear me down. So that was at the moment that the drive was so hot. I used all that anger and all that I didn't even know what to call it at the time because I didn't have a way to describe it, but it was just huge disappointment. I just couldn't believe my father couldn't just let me have a bad day, do what I had to do to get a victory, and just be more happy that we won and we moved forward versus worrying about that actual personal performance because I'm going to fix it. I'm not a guy that just sits around, right? He's not talking to some slough. In my whole life, I've never been that way. So anytime there's something wrong, I'd fix it, right? I'd make it better.
Man, you're talking and you're telling that story, and I call myself holding my breath. I'm like, I've heard the story. You told me off air. You've told me before about that story, about that breaking point.
I get nervous when I tell it. I get my chest gets tight. My hands get tight. I get hot. I can still remember it. I feel like I want to smash it right now because I remember how that made me feel. And then I never wanted to do that. And so like the lesson learned is that if you're teaching someone, let's say it's your kid, right? So advice to parents. I see this one right now. I'm doing skills clinics and helping Edgewood coach third grade boys. They don't need you barking at them constantly. So parents, it's not your job. Your job is to show up, support them, pay for the league if you really want to pay for it, and then shut up. It's not your job.
Yes.
It's not your job to do anything else. Because if they have it inside of them, they will create the energy. They will work extra. They will do the things they need to do. You do not need to remind them. Then that's not their sport. Or they're just there casually. You just need to get over it, right? They're not going to be there for a scholarship. Less than 0.1% make it to college. So your kid's probably not going to make it. Okay, let's just be real clear about that. So sorry in the banter there, but like that part about like my breaking point and learning those things is how I approach it now. Is I always say, hey, buddy, I want to do these things with you. Can I teach you some stuff? Dad's learned a couple things about this sport or this thing. Do you want me to teach you?
You're one of those guys that over my 32-year teaching career, there's not many that I will say to a kid, don't listen to me, your coach. You need to listen to your mom or your dad because they were great. And you are like that 0.5% of a parent that played at a very high collegiate level. So as a coach of your
So
kid,
did you.
I'd say listen to Charlie Wills, but then also listen to your dad, and then also listen to your coach.
Yeah, I wanted to honor my parents, but at that point, my dad wasn't doing things that were honorable, right? Which was really hard because at 20 years old, I didn't think I had a lot of belief in God. I didn't have a foundation. I knew character-wise why, you talked about the characteristics, the core values, is because I knew those existed in my body. I just didn't know how to formulate them. And anytime someone went against those, I felt nothing but anger and rage because I felt like someone was doing it to me. They weren't. I learned later that it was just because they don't have their own values. They don't know how to hold themselves up. So what I teach now younger kids is we're going to play under these core values. We're going to act this way. And no matter whether you win or you lose, guess what? We're going to lose more than we win. So what are we going to do about that, right? Like, what are we going to take away? So like, my son plays a lot of soccer right now. He's 8 years old. I know nothing about soccer, but I know sports.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, when you're not on the field, what do you need to be doing? Cheering the team. Yep. Don't banter in their ear. Don't screw off. Cheer them on. When you're in the game, what do you need to do? Talk to your teammates. Celebrate them. Tell them they're doing good. Be the leader on the court, right? And then, so what I want him to learn is, because he's a big kid like me, he's almost 5 feet tall. He's 8 years old. He's a big boy. But he's told to be small. Always, right? Because he's physically strong like his dad. So I do not want him to learn how I learned, and he's probably going to get punished more if he accidentally goes too far in the physicality piece. But in sport, you can really let that go. And so in like soccer, I'm like, hey, buddy, you can get that elbow in there. I don't push him, just don't let him in. You can use your weight and your force and block him out or change the rhythm of the game or force him to go to another way because you're so big. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, just a little nudge. Just for next play, you think about it. Just give a nudge and move forward. He goes, okay. Tim, he cleaned that kid's clock. I looked at him, I was like, no, not what Dad was talking about.
That sounds very similar to the story of your cross country. You kind of move somebody out of the way, and he tossed the kid probably.
Yeah, he did. And so what I love about that is he got called for a yellow card. And then we talked about it after, and he was like, yeah, that was a little too much, huh? And I was like, just a little too much. But guess what? You can adjust. That's what's great about sport. You can make errors, failures, and you can adjust and get better for the next game. And now he's one of those elite defensemen where his coach knows that kid's not getting past. Grant's literally just going to stand in the way or cut him off, and boom, kid's going to hit his chest, and they're so small, they're going to bounce and go the other direction. And I told him that's his gift. You don't have to be the fastest. You got to be the smartest and know where to get to somebody. So I love sport because it teaches you that you can always adjust, make yourself better, and you can always learn from, even if I don't know a sport, I know the basics of life of sport, right? Like, I know those basics. And so those are the great things I want to hand off to any generation in teaching it. Yeah, I can teach them skills and training and all the things because I've experienced it. But the thing I want him or any boy or girl that I teach, there are some basics. Mm-hmm. These are really key basics. And it's actually harder to teach the parents to keep their mouth shut than it is to teach the kids on the things to do.
That's a heck of a point. Yeah, I like that.
I'm sure we could talk for hours on
that. Hey, I know, because I'm thinking probably like a listener right now. You touched on the water bottle, the shaker bottle into the wall, and you talked about a little length of time where you didn't talk to your dad, but mom and dad were still coming to the games, but you didn't talk to him. I want to circle back then now to maybe a 2 or however long, fast forward to what happened to patch things up, because sometimes, probably more than not, people will not talk to their parents or a loved one or a sibling or a friend, and they won't patch it up. Tell the listeners how you patched that up
It got worse before it got better, Tim. I then was kind of placating, being with my parents and not talking to them very much, not honoring them. I just wanted to be my own man and stop being treated like a child. And I didn't know how to do that and set a boundary. And so it just got worse before it got better. I tried to patch things up thinking they were getting better by saying things to my dad, and they just wouldn't, right? They just wouldn't get better. He just didn't care to get better, right? And that was hard for me because I looked at my whole life as anytime I had a mistake or things that I did wrong, I always wanted to improve, even as much as it hurt. Sometimes hearing that you didn't treat somebody well or you didn't do something well, I always wanted to take it that way. So when I saw my dad, who I looked up to, who wouldn't own his stuff, it made me angrier. So instead of solving it, I just got more bitter, more angry. 20 years go by, Tim, that we barely talk. There's a little bit of bonding here and there because, I think there's always a love between a father and a son. But sometimes you're just in this place because you just didn't have a discussion of what it looks like. And I wasn't being led by a man that knew what that looked like because he didn't have that in his life. His dad left when he was, yes, here, like 8, 9, 10 years old. His dad left and never came back. So he didn't have a man to tell him how to become a man and what he expected of him. He had to create all of it on his own. And some he did good, some he did terrible. And so he died a little over 2 years ago now. And that whole year up before he passed away, I took that as an opportunity. I sucked up a lot of pride and said, I'm going to go clear the air and go do this. And so in a different way, we can talk about this deeper at another point,
Yep.
but created that time, spent a lot of time having deep, thoughtful, meaningful conversation where my dad broke down, I broke down, we talked about things at a really, really deep level, patched those up. And you made to mention this earlier, you can write on a chalkboard, but there's always chalk left over even if you wipe it off. So there's always something looming, but over time I was hoping, which we didn't have. I knew he was going to pass away in about a year because he just had a timeline with his disease that we just knew it was coming. So I just wanted to spend more time with him. And dude, there's nothing like losing your dad. Nobody's prepared for it, especially when you had a tumultuous kind of upbringing. You're really not ready for it. And you don't know who you are and what you're doing. But I decided probably within 6 months of him dying, he gave me a lot of gifts. And I wrote those down. I think about them often, about him, but about those gifts. And I try to talk about them whenever I can, that there are a lot of horrible things that people go through, but you're either half full or you're half empty. And I just choose to be more than half full on everything. And I take those pains as a blessing, and I want to break that generational piece that was there to the best of my ability, and then set my son up for great success and to have him be a great man.
Yeah, you touched on something that I just got done. I just finished a book called I Have My Doubts, and there's a lot of scripture in there, and there's some stories in there just about, some of the things you talked about, of patching things up, moving forward, where everybody's going to make mistakes, and we're meant to make mistakes. We're also meant to find people that we can learn from, and there's so many things you said there, and like I said, I think we're going to go and do another episode. You kind of gave us some pillars or some building blocks. You're going to now put the mortar in there between there and share those things. But I like we said off air, you had the ability to be able to do that with your dad who was still alive.
Right.
And you patched that up, and as you were talking, I could tell when you started talking about patching that up, I could see you almost right in front of me, like take a deep breath and exhale, and you're still doing that. I did that with my mom 25 years later, albeit it was at her gravesite, and same thing. It was like a weight off your shoulder. You could finally take a deep breath and breathe for the first time. And that's what I always encourage people to do in my keynote presentations is to, if you can make amends, forgive somebody, neighbor, sibling, parent, child, loved one, it's going to do you some good. it's probably going to do that other person some good as well. And it's just a chance to let something off, drop something, because there's always going to be some things that we're going to have to pick up along the line that are going to weigh us down again, but they won't weigh us down as much as if we're hauling all of the baggage around.
Well, we shouldn't haul it because God gave us that ability, right? Jesus died for those sins, for those reasons, so we could always give those up. And we're just too prideful as a human race to give them up most of the time, right? That's usually where it comes from. It comes from pride, ego is the reason we don't dump them off. I mean, think how many times, if you look back at all the places you should have been punished for things, right? If you really think about it that way, which I do, I think about like, gosh, I deserve X. And it didn't happen because guess what? I got grace and I got forgiven by our Lord and Savior. And that's the only reason I exist in the way that I exist. So why can't I give that same thing to someone else? Why can't I give that away? Why can't I say, I'm sorry? That sucks that went that way.
Yeah.
I hope that we can patch it up and let them deal with it because it's just you releasing yourself from not any responsibility, but just holding on to that anger or hate or whatever it is that you're holding on to. It's just a release of that because it's God's. Let him have it, right? He's big enough and strong enough to take all of it. So why not?
Yeah, it's just one of those things that we've talked now over. I've known you since your playing days a little bit, but then I really got to know you in 2008, and we talked about this, and we can touch on that later about our connection. But if a great big tall guy, physically a specimen at 6'8", probably still 225 to 240 pounds, 250. If you can set all of these things aside and just say, you know what, I made a mistake, or I forgive you, or you know what, I have to apologize as well. If you can do it and I can do it, and it makes us feel better, and then us sharing our stories that, hey, on episode number 8 of Survive and Thrive, 8791, you need to hear this guy, Charlie Wills, talk about a tumultuous relationship with his dad, and he makes amends and does some forgiving, and he's a much better man. And so was his dad in those last days, months, weeks. Made it a lot easier.
Yeah, let's end on a high note. We started this off because you gave me a memory that I haven't thought of in a long time. Is that when we originally met, it was because your daughter Emily and her friends were the Walker twins and some other girls that I remember. Triplets. Sorry, that's right, triplets. I remember being there. I did some training with them, watching their season, and you reminded me of the story. We were at, I think, Wanna. Was that it?
Yeah, we're going to put a little plug in for Wanna, Wanakee, Wisconsin.
So we were there, beverages, food, I think trying to take the mind off the girls and probably everybody just to like wash away because it was supposed to be a season of them probably doing a little bit more than what happened. And so I think everybody felt down. And you reminded me of the story. And as soon as you said it, I remember like all of it was starting to flash back. And I think that's just how I'm wired is I cannot sit and sulk. Like I just can't do it. I just can't do it. It's just not how I'm wired. And I think you said that I popped up and I was like, damn it, we're not doing this. And I grabbed the girls and I said, we're going bowling. And we just started having fun and high-fiving and like changed the entire mood. And I really feel that is part of that personality that is the survive and the thrive is every time there's something that doesn't go your way, guess what? Just get back up on the horse and go do it again.
And you changed those girls' attitudes. I should have probably went bowling that night. I'm still in counseling. 17 years later, I'm still in counseling from that night. But no, I could see you just fidgeting away, and you just finally stood up. You almost pounded the bar, and you said, we're going bowling. Girls, grab your shoes. And, it's Charlie Wills talking. Big, powerful guy. Boom, they went out, and all of a sudden they're giggling and laughing, and you changed their attitudes, and they probably went to bed a little bit easier that night. I still hurting a little bit, but it wasn't hurting as much as Charlie grabbing them and taking them and taking them bowling. It's a powerful memory because I still remember it 17 years later. And That's probably
Thanks
what
for
got
sharing.
me. That's probably what got me in with Charlie Wills. So we're going to put a wrap on this. What an episode! Your stories about growing up and becoming an elite basketball player were so cool. And it was a powerful story about your relationship with your dad, and we're going to come back and revisit that and fill in the mortar between the bricks and how you evolved over the years. Today, I got to know you a little bit better, which is I'm better for that, and hopefully our listeners as well. Your life as a basketball player really epitomized the survive and thrive approach necessary to succeed in life. So my call to action is, keep working hard. You can achieve your goals, much like Charlie did. Play several sports, get involved in other activities to help yourself be well-rounded. And then you not only have to learn to be a good athlete and an elite athlete, then you have to evolve from being a child and being a young man and a college student to now you're in the role of your dad. And your dad's no longer here, but he's still teaching you with the things that uh, you picked on that I'm not going to do with my own kid, or I really like this part my dad did. But he's still teaching you, believe it or not.
He still is.
So on our next episode, I want to say thanks, Charlie. On our next episode, I believe we're going to try to get Charlie back here sooner than later because there's some people that are listening right now that want to hear, fill in the blanks. And believe it or not, you probably are very similar to a lot of elite athletes in not only the Dane County area, but wherever you're listening to this podcast. So until next time, Survive and Thrive 8791. My guest today was Charlie Wills. Keep surviving and thriving. We'll have another solid episode next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.